welcome, dear viewers. Today's episode broadcasting live from the heart of Beirut, and I'm your host, Farah Hatwi. A powerful explosion rocked the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, on Saturday evening, accompanied by reports of heavy fighter jet activity in the skies. Two airstrikes targeted Mount Atan, located south of the city. Yemen State News Agency Saba attributed the strikes to American, British warplanes carrying out an attack on the Atan area. Israelis immediately denied any involvement in the attack, even as tensions between Israel and Yemen have been escalating. These tensions have been further exacerbated by Israelis' growing threats against Sana'a, particularly due to Yemen's ongoing support for Palestine and its people, as well as its backing of the Palestinian resistance. To discuss these latest updates, I'm joined here by Dr. Mohammed Swaidan, academic and writer in international affairs. Hello and welcome to this episode, Dr. Mohammed. As we highlighted, the latest news coming in, American and British warplanes conducted an airstrike on Yemen yesterday at night, targeting a missile storage facility and a command and control facility. It is said that it had conducted the strike to disrupt and degrade Houthi operations. How do you read this escalation amid an escalation from between the Israelis and the Yemenis, and now the Americans and the British suddenly intensifying their own fire?
First of all, being an attack by American and British fighters is another clue or another evidence that in this war, in this more than 1 year of the war on Gaza, the Americans, the British, the Europeans are participating in offensive and defensive roles with Israel. It's the first time these superpowers don't only defend Israel, they try also to have an offensive role in the region. They are telling Israel that don't think about Yemen, continue your war inside of Gaza, and let us think about Yemen and let us go and hit the Yemenis. Of course, what they did is because the Yemenis are supporting Gaza, is because the Yemenis are sending missiles to Israel, and that's why they are taking the offensive role in this war. So this gives another evidence that everything is happening in the region has three main players: the local ones, mainly Israel and Gaza; the regional ones, where Lebanon had a certain role, Iraq, Yemen, and everything; and also on the international level, which is the British, the Americans. So this is really a huge war where different players participate in. The Americans, for the first time, defend Israel and also have an offensive role in the region.
Okay, for sure, that was not other pretext that they used in justifying these actions. They said that it's because of due to the maritime operations conducted by the Houthis on our ships and vessels in the seas, and that's why we carried on these attacks on Yemen. So this is the justification. Of course, you're analyzing the situation, but why presenting this reason when the real thing is what you highlighted?
Look, if you go and read what's written inside of the American news, American magazines, no one denies that what the U.S. is doing in the region is in support of Israel. No one believes that it's about the maritime. What the Yemenis are doing by closing the maritime is only affecting Israel, and the whole world knows it. And not only Israel, it also has some effect on Europe, on the US, on different countries. But this is the cost every country that supports Israel should pay. When you decide, why can the US, why can Europe support Israel to the maximum limit, and the Yemenis and other countries in the region don't have the right to support Palestinians? So that's the question. Anyway, no one believes that it's about the maritime thing. All the Americans, all the Europeans know that it's all about defending Israel. It's all about not letting the Yemenis. And let us give another clue. Well, what the Americans are hitting inside of Yemen are not missiles that are used to close any maritime route. They are the missiles that are used to hit Israel.
Yes.
That's why they are also they're always hitting long-range missiles.
Yes. But it has said that it had conducted the strike to disrupt and degrade Houthi operations, according to them, such as attacks against U.S. Navy warships and merchant vessels in the southern Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, and Gulf of Aden. That's the thing that they highlighted here. But then again, last night, observing the analysis coming in the news, you can easily tell that the Israelis were provoking for this and were asking for this through some of the members in the cabinet. They were highlighting that it's supposed to be an attack on standing from a coalition, or a coalition should attack, not only us should attack. And if to attack, then we have to attack Iran and not the Yemenis, because Iran is the one behind, supportive to the Yemenis. After that, immediately Yemen got attacked by the British and the US. How do you identify this scenario?
Because it's the same thing we have been saying, is that every action the US does in the region, along with the British and European countries, should help or should serve Israel interests. What happened here is that Israelis expressed that they are in need of support from a coalition to defend themselves against Yemenis. That was the message. Of course, the first
in
one...
less than 24 hours.
Of course.
In less than 24 hours, the coalition abided by the...
Exactly. So
by what the Israelis wanted.
That's how the relation between Israel and the US is. When Israel is in trouble, when Israel needs help, let's not forget. After October 7, the first one who came to Israel to meet Benjamin Netanyahu and to let him stand on his feet and go to war in Gaza was Joe Biden. This is how the Americans work. They are always in support of Israel, whatever Israel wants. So once Israel asks for a coalition to hit Yemen, this coalition comes and works and hits Yemen.
Yes.
Once Israel needs green light to attack Lebanon to a war on Lebanon, the Americans give Israel the green light needed to attack Lebanon. Now the Israelis, for example, in Lebanon are asking the US for a green light to stay in Lebanon for the whole 60 days. And the Americans are giving them, although the Americans are the chair of the committee that's responsible for
overseeing
exactly the ceasefire deal, but they are not doing so. So that's how this relation is. It's Israelis asking and always Americans abiding by their questions. That's what happened in Yemen, and that's what will happen in other places. This is how this relation is being built. And let us not also forget that what's happening in Yemen doesn't serve American national interests related to American economy, related to American people.
It's great losses.
Exactly. It's great losses, but it serves American interests regarding Israel. That's why they are doing what they are doing. And if it was true that they are only doing that to protect the maritime routes, then why are they hitting long-range missiles inside of Yemen? Long-range missiles don't close the maritime routes.
Yes.
Long-range missiles are only built to hit Israel. So what they are doing is they are defending the Israelis. They are acting offensively in the region just to serve Israeli interests.
Okay. What's surprising is that the Israelis rushed to deny the responsibility for that attack. It denied its involvement even in the attack on Yemen that took place last night. How do you read this?
Well, after the Yemenis used the missile rocket Palestine 2, and this is hypersonic that has some kind of technology that could reach its target inside of Israel. So now Israel fears that Yemenis could use big numbers of these missiles to hit inside of Israel. That's why they don't want to be any target. They don't want to give the Yemenis a reason to increase their targeting inside of Israel. They know that Yemenis are continuing to support Gaza right now. They don't want to give them another reason to hit Israel.
Okay.
That's why they are saying that we are not we have no relation with what's happening. Your problem is with the Americans. Go serve your interests against the Americans, not against us. So that they put the Americans in the front, and that's how they always work. Look, Israelis, although Israel is maybe the number one technological country or entity in the region, one of the best technological entities in the world. It has one of the best developed militaries, one of the best economies, and supported by the best number one countries in the world. But Israel doesn't have the courage to face its enemies. That always happens. Well, let's not forget what happened in Lebanon during the war. They had a lot of planes, drones that were hitting their targets, but where was the Israeli soldier? He was behind, because Israel, this is how it works. It works from behind. And it's always their allies are in the front. Their allies are the ones who take responsibility to their actions in order to defend Israel and for Israel not to pay the prices. And that's what's happening with Yemen. Israel doesn't want to pay any price regarding Yemenis, and that's why it's not taking any responsibility for what's happening.
Do you think that it's a failure to the Israelis at one point when dealing with the Yemeni file? Because according to analysts, the Israelis lack enough information about the developed, sophisticated weapons used by the Yemenis, and they were pretty much surprised. Even their own Iron Dome failed in intercepting these hypersonic ballistic missiles. The Israelis, is it a failure to them that they weren't aware of what their enemy looks like and how sophisticated weapons, the amount of sophisticated weapons that he has?
To be realistic, I don't consider it to be a failure as I consider it to be a success for the Yemenis. What I think is that...
But these Iron Domes, they cost billions of dollars.
Of course.
And they were bragging about it for a very long time.
Yes, because they built the Iron Domes in order to serve their interests against countries that are on Palestine's borders. So the main role of the Iron Dome was regarding the resistance in Lebanon, if anything happened from Syria, from Palestine. It wasn't... Israel didn't expect that at one day countries that are enemies to it have hypersonic missiles. So that was the success of the Yemenis. The success of the Yemenis is that they have the technology that could reach its target, and that
can maneuver also.
Exactly, over one of the best weapons that Israel has. That's the success of the Yemenis. And let us also take into consideration that, well, Yemen became an enemy to Israel in the last years. Israel haven't had time yet.
But Israelis underestimated their capabilities.
Exactly. They didn't have time yet to understand really what are their capabilities, because they always considered Yemen to be a very far country, to be a country that's in war with Saudi Arabia, to be a country that's very poor, doesn't have any technological innovation, that doesn't have the money needed to bring some of these weapons. That's the success of the Yemenis. Being under siege, being under war with Saudi Arabia for many years, being under sanctions from the West, and being a poor country, and still they have some really developed missiles like these hypersonic missiles. That's their success, and that's where Israel didn't expect for Yemenis to have these, and that's why
they're unable to deal with the situation.
Exactly.
And they're asking for the coalition to intervene and help them in the attacks on Yemen.
Exactly, because Israel can bear to have tens of drones that are hitting Tel Aviv per day. But of course, it can't bear to have tens of hypersonic missiles that are hitting Tel Aviv every day. And that's why they are trying to avoid a direct confrontation with the Yemenis to the last minute. And that's what they are doing. That's why they are not taking responsibility for their actions, because they know that the Yemenis' capabilities are different. They don't know what they have. With Hezbollah in Lebanon, they had a lot of information about Hezbollah's capabilities.
Yes, and they have been watching since 2006, but at one point, as if they underestimated Yemen capabilities, and that's why they lacked certain observation of even the leaders over there, the Yemeni leaders, the Yemeni advanced missiles. And of course, here Ansar Allah member Hizam al-Assad said that, and here I quote, "We have reached advanced techniques for various types of weapons that could be unveiled in the future." He further asserted that Yemen has the right to achieve self-sufficiency and acquire weapons, manufacturing technologies, and to engage with any country. So this is pure surprise to the Israelis that they did not calculate, or not among their own calculations.
Exactly. Uh, the most point where a person cannot take a decision to attack is when he doesn't know what his enemy has.
Exactly.
If I know what you have, then I will have the courage to hit you. What drove Israel to go with the war in Lebanon, because they had very clear information about some of the main capabilities that Hezbollah has.
And the leaders.
And the leaders. This isn't available in Yemen. That's why Israel doesn't have the courage today to go to a war with Yemen. They don't have
They're pushing the Americans
exactly.
and the Brits.
They don't have the information. And usually when you don't have information, you expect the worst scenario.
Okay.
You can't expect the realistic scenario because you lack information. With Yemen, Israel lacks information. That's why Israel puts the worst scenario with Yemenis. And that's why they are not taking responsibility.
Okay.
And that's why they are driving the Americans, because they believe that if someone can face the worst scenario, it's the Americans, not us.
Okay.
Let them face it.
Ansarullah member also highlighted that it's not only about advanced weapons, but they also have, let me here highlight, he also said, affirming that Yemen's target bank is vast and comprehensive and includes vital military and infrastructure targets for the Israeli entity. He also revealed that all targets within the Israeli entity have now come within the range of attacks thanks to the introduction of a new system for Yemeni's missile force. So it's not only about presenting advanced weapons as we highlighted, but also they have specific military sites and as he highlighted, range of attacks that he knows where to hit and when to hit. How dangerous is that?
When we speak about
so the Yemenis are observing the Israelis.
Not only the Yemenis. One of the faces of the axis of resistance is sharing intelligence information, and that's what the axis does. So, well, all the world knows that. Well, maybe the party that most knows Israel is Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah in Lebanon has a huge amount of information about Israeli entity, and it's very realistic to perceive that this information Hezbollah is giving to all its allies in the region.
Okay.
So these information are also in all countries of the axis of resistance. So it's not only about Yemen's intelligence capabilities, it's about the axis of resistance intelligence capabilities.
Axis of the resistance capability, so you're talking about a collaboration between all the axes of the resistance, especially when it comes to sharing the information of Israeli military sites to make the job easier for the Yemenis.
Of course.
Of when to attack and how to attack.
Yeah, maybe it's hard maybe to provide weapons from one country to another, but it's very easy to share intelligence.
Logistics.
Yeah, it's very easy to share intelligence. So I think that it's very realistic to say that yes, the Yemenis today have all they want to know about Israel sites. They have taken this information from countries and parts of the axis of resistance, and they also have their own work about following up new data regarding Israel. So they have a huge bank of data regarding Israeli sites. They proved that they have the right weapons. They are telling Israelis that they have more technological weapons. And let us
unveiled up till now.
Exactly. Let us put these three things: intelligence information, you proved that you have something, and you're saying you have more. And how will Israeli react? Israeli here will react regarding the worst scenario with the Yemenis, and that's why they are doing what they are doing today, and that's why they are avoiding a war with Yemen. When Yemen is hitting Tel Aviv, not another city.
Yes.
When Yemen is hitting Tel Aviv, and Israelis are sitting aside, that's why Israel is not taking responsibility. That has a reason. Israel doesn't want to take responsibility. But let's take into consideration something. Things may change.
In what dimension?
Because it's always in international relations, in international security, things are not stable.
Okay.
One time you are obliged to face the worst case scenario. Israel may reach a point where it doesn't have a choice rather than facing the worst case scenario. Which is going towards a war, direct confrontation with the Yemenis.
Okay.
This may happen. Till now, it's still not favorable, but it may happen.
Okay. This is a very important point, by the way, because if Israel decides to do that, do you think that they will win by only air jets attacks on Yemen? Because Yemenis, the only way that you can actually weaken the Yemenis is by a ground incursion.
Yeah.
And we all know the ground incursion, the cost that any enemy will pay once they decide to go into Yemen, because other nations failed in that. Do you think it's applicable with the Israelis, especially that they do lack information again about the Yemeni leaders, the Yemeni agendas, and the Yemeni strategies, and even the Yemeni geographical nature of the country?
Yeah, look, here, when we're speaking about a direct confrontation between Israel and Yemen, we're speaking on different scenarios.
Yes.
Scenario number one is the direct confrontation remains only by hitting targets inside of Yemen, while Yemen is hitting targets inside of Israel with no ground invasion. And the goal of this war is to weaken the Yemenis. So Israel will go along with the US, because the US is already attacking Yemenis.
Hand in hand.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they will go along with the Americans and the British to a direct confrontation with the Yemenis, and the goal here is not to occupy Yemen, but rather to weaken the Yemenis, to eliminate that they stop their support to Gaza, they stop their war over, they stop hitting Israel. So this is the first scenario. The second scenario is having a coalition, a war of coalition against Yemenis, and I think that's the best scenario for Israel to achieve, but it's still till now not favorable to other countries. Is for Israel and the US to be responsible for hitting targets
But
inside.
the Brits and the US are already doing it.
Yeah, to increase hitting targets inside of Yemen, along with some allies from the region, mainly Arab states, that will go towards the ground invasion inside of Yemenis. So that's also a second scenario where you have not only an Israeli-American-British war, but Israeli-American-British along with some Arab states that go towards the war against Yemen. This is scenario number two. So there are different scenarios of how Israel will go toward direct confrontation with the Yemenis.
Okay.
And it starts from only hitting targets to weaken and reaching to ground occupation.
Okay, these are the scenarios of who is going to hit Yemen. What
Yes.
about Yemen? How will they retaliate on these American-British attacks and the Israelis' attacks?
Yeah, they will continue in the same thing they are doing today, but increasing their work. Meaning that, well, if they
Continue to attack Tel Aviv?
yeah, more than Tel Aviv. If they are hitting today, for example, one ship per week or one American ship per day, they will be hitting 2 and 3 and 4 times per day. If they are hitting Tel Aviv one time every once in a while, they will hit not only Tel Aviv, they will hit different cities inside of Israel at the same time every day or every once in a while. So we are speaking about a different type of war. Yemen will move from support front to a direct confrontation war, and this is totally
Okay.
different.
Yes.
That's what happened with Lebanon. Let's remember, when Lebanon was a support front, he mainly used to hit the north of Palestine. When there was a war, a direct confrontation, all of Israel was under target. Haifa and Tel Aviv was being targeted. So that's a different thing. That's what will happen with the Yemenis. But let us imagine the scenario with hypersonic missiles. So I think that's what the Israelis fear. And that's why the Israelis today are studying different scenarios in their hands.
Okay, the enemy is trying to minimize, Dr. Muhammad, its losses in the media to maintain its military standing and the morale of its settlers. It portrays the areas where the interceptor missile fell as targets hit by our missiles. Let's speak about the how the Israeli government is actually dealing with the situation internally, domestically. What will that, or where will that keep them amid bragging about weakening Hezbollah, about demolishing the route that joins Syria to Lebanon, and the entrance of weapons, Gaza, Hamas? They are showing their people that they are dominant in this situation, and they already weakened the axis of the resistance. The second day, the settlers wake up with rockets falling on Tel Aviv, more than 16 injured, 1.5 million or 1.2 million Israeli settlers rush to shelters. So what kind of contradiction will that display among the Israeli settlers and the Israeli government?
Like today, there are several facts that we have to state. The number one fact, of course, countries of the axis of resistance are being weakened after more than 1 year of war. But also, Israel is being weakened also after more than 1 year of war. It's a very logical conclusion for two parties being at war. The two parties will go out of the war being weaker than they were before it, and
Yes.
that's the logic thing to say. So yes, parties of the axis are weaker, but Israel is also weak. It's not about. It's not that.
But it's not prevailing that to the public. It's not prevailing that to the Israelis. It's not showing that to the Israelis. Always the news, especially if you observe Israeli newspapers, you can easily understand how they present Bibi Netanyahu as the heroic, as the hero that came and saved the Israelis and achieved higher goals, especially after assassinating top leaders in Hezbollah and also in Hamas. But that at one point, when they see that they're not safe where they are, then definitely that would raise a major question here.
Look, the media can say whatever it wants, but for me, what I observe is how the Israeli settlers react. And I have 4 evidences that prove that Israeli settlers do perceive Israel as weak. The number one thing is that till now, Israeli settlers are refusing to return to the north, and the Israeli government is obliged or is providing to pay a huge amount of money to every settler that returns. If Israeli settlers believe that Israel has a leverage today, that Hezbollah in Lebanon is being weakened to the maximum limit, then why aren't these settlers returning to their homes? So that's the first evidence. Number 2 evidence, 74% of Israelis today are with Israel stopping the war in Gaza. If Israel has this leverage it claims inside of Gaza and that it's going toward destroying Hamas to the end of it, then why are Israeli settlers asking to stop the war even if this war leads for Hamas re-emerging? So that's because they believe that the goal of destroying Hamas is unrealistic. Number 3, if Israel has the leverage it has, why it doesn't have the courage to take responsibility against what's happening in Yemen, but rather it's asking the coalition to attack Yemenis. Number 23. Number 4, and finally, it is regarding the relation with Iran. Till now, Israel is always putting Americans in the front against Iran. Till now, Israel, how did it react after Iran hit Israel with 180 ballistic missiles? How did Israel react after Iran hit it for the first time? It was a much weaker reaction than Iran's actions. So these 4 prove that, yes, Israel and the media can say whatever it wants, but neither the settlers believe, nor we believe, nor the whole world believe. And if Israel had the leverage it has, also number 5, why would the US be participating in the region offensively and defensively? These all prove that, yes, Israel is a strong entity, but Israel is a strong entity that's being weakened, and this strong entity that's being weakened is fighting multi-front wars, and it cannot bear to find these multi-front wars alone. It needs its allies to be alongside it, and that's what settlers see today.
And do you think that Israel will actually go to another scenario among the scenarios that you highlighted, how they will defend themselves or how they will attack the Yemenis, by causing a sectarian strife within Yemen? Do you think that's a scenario that is possible, to weaken Yemen from the inside, as long as they lack information about the area and about the advanced weapons that the Yemenis have and all the strategies that they're working on?
This is related to the second scenario. When we speak about destroying Yemen from inside, the Israelis need to coordinate any step with some Arab states, because we all know that inside of Yemenis there are faction of groups that are supported by UAE, others by Saudi Arabia, and different countries in the region. So for Israel to be able to move these groups inside of Yemen, it needs the help of Arab countries. So this is scenario number 2, where it's not Israeli-American war over Yemen, Israeli-American-British-Arab war over Yemen. These groups, all the world knows that they only move if they have support from some Arab states. So for this scenario to happen, Israel needs to coordinate its step with some Arab states. Until now, it doesn't seem that Arab states are really interested in going another time with the war with Yemen.
Why, in your opinion?
Oh, because they paid the huge price before of that, when there was a war between Saudi Arabia and the Yemenis. So
you think here the Americans and the Brits will push towards that to cause an Arab strife, to encourage, of course, the Saudi Arabia to engage in that war, because they are unable to do it on their own?
Look, for over all the years of the war between Saudi Arabia and the Yemenis, the Saudis were asking the Americans to support them offensively.
Okay.
The Americans all the way refused to have an offensive role against Yemen. Now, after the Americans are having an offensive role supporting Israel, the Saudis were really angry. They were telling the Americans, when we asked for support, you didn't support us. But when Israel asked, we supported them. That's one of the reasons that led the Saudi leaders.
That's a very important point.
Yeah, that's one of the most important points that led the Saudi leaders to not believe that at one day the U.S. is really gonna help Saudi Arabia in any war. And that's what drives Saudi Arabia today to refuse participating in the war.
Okay.
They don't want to be some country that serves others' interests against their own interests. They know that if they go against one war, Yemenis may hit Aramco. What will the US do? Well, when the Yemenis hit Aramco a couple of years ago, the Americans didn't do anything.
Okay.
The Saudis today believe...
So they will not be dragged into that.
They don't want to be dragged into that. Things may change.
Yes.
If maybe the Americans may give Saudi Arabia a huge things whereby Saudi Arabia will change its mind. But till now, the Saudis know where their interests lie. They know that they don't have any interest in being part of the conflict between the acts of resistance and between Israel. That's why Saudis are sending sometimes positive messages to Iran. That's why they were saying that Iran's national security should be respected. That was a Saudi message.
Yes.
It's because Saudi Arabia understands that its interest is by not being part of the conflict, not supporting Palestine, but also not supporting Israel.
Okay, so what are we going to see in the coming days? It all depends on how Yemenis will retaliate to this American-British offensive, or we will see an escalation in the region concerning more attacks on Yemen.
No, I don't think that it's related to how Yemenis will react. It's related more to how the other axis will react. The Yemenis will continue to work the same way they are working, trying to hit U.S. British ships that are having a war with it, and continuing to be a support front to
carry
Gaza.
on with the maritime operations. They will continue with that.
Of course, because continuing. Look, once European countries have the right to protect Israel and to participate with the siege on Gaza, then everyone that wants to support humanity has the right to support it the way he wants. Today, the whole world, even the US, says that there is a huge humanitarian crisis inside of Gaza.
Yes.
It's not something that it's being fought about between different parties. Even the one who is hitting Yemenis, who is hitting Palestinians, is saying that there is a huge humanitarian crisis
Even
inside
the
of
Israeli
Gaza.
newspapers, Haaretz, is actually highlighting these violations reached its peak.
Exactly.
And humanitarian crisis has reached its stall inside Palestine.
True. So when the whole world has this being a fact, then the least anyone can do is support what the Yemenis are doing. The Yemenis are adding. Look, the Americans are always saying that, well, we are pressuring Benjamin Netanyahu, we are pressuring the Israeli government to stop their war on Gaza. We are pressuring them to allow humanitarian aid to get inside of Gaza. But how are you pressuring them? Well, if you are not lying about this pressure, what Yemenis are doing is also pressuring Israel. So let's put your hands with Yemenis and press Israel more.
Okay.
So it's not about that. Blocking the maritime route for anything going toward Israel is related to the war in Gaza. This will continue. Being a support front from the Yemen will continue. It's about how the other axis will react towards these three things. And how this axis will react will reveal whether the region is going towards escalation, or we will have the same level of escalation that's found today.
Okay, of course, we will have our eyes on that to see that kind of escalation. Let's speak about the Israeli invasion of Syrian land. To date, Israel has completely occupied nearly 500 square kilometers of southern Syria, demolishing all Syrian military sites on the slopes of Mount Hermon and the hills of Quneitra and Daraa. Israeli occupation forces also established 7 permanent permanent positions, and this is the latest news, throughout the buffer zone along the line which stretches across the rural areas of Damascus, Dar'a and Quneitra. Of course, this is a complete invasion of international law, a complete invasion of Syrian sovereignty. But yet again, we see the opposition, the armed opposition now trying to create a government very busy with the internal affairs and with the foreign affairs and neglecting this major factor. Though 500 kilometers, 500 square kilometers, Israel has went deep into Syria. What does that tell you about the opposition?
Well, no, not only about opposition. Number one, this tells me that international law doesn't work anymore. It didn't work in the past, it's not working today, and it won't work in the future. If anyone wants to defend its interests, it's only power. And this is, when we speak about international relations, we speak about mainly, there are different schools that explain international relations. One of the most notable schools is the realism. What realism states is that the most important thing is power. When you maintain power, you maintain your interests.
Yes.
And that's what we are seeing today. We are living in a realistic world. We are living in realism. We are living in a world where only power protects your interests. And the good thing, or the funny thing, is that the ones who established this realism school are Americans. So Americans were saying, in theories, that, well, if you want to maintain your interests, don't depend on international law, don't depend on anything, just depend on your power. And when Lebanon or countries of the region depend on their power, they become the ones who are not abiding by international law. But you Americans are the ones that said, well, realism is the thing that explains international relations. So how is this explanation only abided by you and not us?
Defines the hypocrisy of the West.
Exactly. So number one, it tells us that international law doesn't work. Number two, it tells us that the only way to defend our land is by having resistance. What let the Israelis not occupy this huge amount of land inside of Lebanon is because we have a resistance in Lebanon. And that's why yesterday Lebanon's Prime Minister Najib Mikati were telling the Americans, after the 60 days end, if the Israelis did stay in Lebanon, then I am not responsible for how Hezbollah will react.
Escalate.
This reveals something. This reveals that now Najib Mikati is telling the world, you let us reach a point where we have to tell the world that the only thing that will let Israelis go out of our lands is when we threaten it with Hezbollah, is when we threaten it with the resistance.
So they came at last to that knowledge after very long years of attacking Hezbollah and wanting to dismantle Hezbollah.
True, because facts are clear. The war ended. There were three different parties that were responsible to let Israel get out of our land: Lebanese government, Lebanese military, and the committee. And these three failed in protecting Lebanese southern lands and protecting the Lebanese southern people. And after these three failed, now the Lebanese government is threatening the enemy with the resistance. So, number one, international law doesn't work. Number two, only resistance protects the land. Number three is that Israel will always work to achieve the greater Israel, the Israel that was mentioned in all historic contexts, the Israel that is whole Palestine, whole Lebanon, whole Syria, parts of Egypt, whole Jordan, parts of Saudi Arabia. So this greater Israel is always a goal that Israelis will work to achieve once they have the chance. So they only need this chance. In Lebanon, they tried, they failed. In Syria, they found the chance, and they took it.
Yes.
That's what they are doing.
They found no opposition or no one opposing these actions, and that's why they continued.
Exactly, and not only that, they are not, well, the ironic thing is that they are not hiding their goals. Benjamin Netanyahu is saying it clearly. We are staying here till the end of 2025. Well, at the end of 2025, who will let you leave it, son?
Exactly.
So he is saying the truth. He is revealing the truth and not hiding it. So number three is that when Israel has the chance, it will go and achieve greater Israel. And that's what every country in the region should fear today. Israel becoming a strong entity. And number four, it reveals that Look, the Syrian opposition groups, mainly the Julani, knows that in order to be able to have a government in the next phase, he needs to let the Americans not fear his rule. He needs to send positive messages to the Americans.
And that's why he said we are not interested in any battle against the Israelis.
Exactly, and that's why he is not. He is giving Israelis what they need. What he is doing, he is not giving. He is not being silent against Israeli violations because he wants to serve Israeli interests, but because he wants to send positive images towards the US.
Why, Dr. Muhammad? Because he wants the sanctions to be lifted, because he wants to his name or the name of his own group to be removed from the list of terrorist organizations. This is what exactly he wants? Come to us, take the land, Israelis, come to us, take our land, invade us, breach our own law and the Syrian sovereignty, but in return we want the United States to actually lift the sanctions, help with the humanitarian aid, and remove the group from the terrorist list. That's how the scenario is.
What Julani wants, he wants different things. Number one, lift the sanctions, mainly the Caesar sanctions. Number two, lift Hayat Tahrir Sham from the terrorist list. Number three, to provide economic and humanitarian aid. Number four, for the US to tell Arab states that, well, this government, you have to support it, because today the Arab states feel danger, mainly UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Egypt. They feel that, well, this Islamic politician is now ruling Syria, and this threatens us. So he wants the Americans to tell these Arab states that no, he's not a danger. And number five, and finally, he knows that, look.
But in return, what does he want? He wants the armed opposition to turn a blind eye towards the Israelis' occupation of Syria, and in return these things will be applied that you highlighted?
No, he wants these four, and he finally wants one very important thing. If we read the history of the region, we can find one thing. No one could be able to control any country after a revolution if he didn't have the support of the US. The only person who did have a successful revolution without the support of the US was Imam Khomeini in Iran. Other than him, everyone who didn't send positive images to the US failed. So he wants.
That's what they tried to do through the delegation that visited this Syrian ground.
They are telling the Americans are telling the Julani that if you want to stay, if you want to rule, you have to give us the thing we need. And I think what the Americans need from the Julani is not related to some internal Syrian things. It's mainly related to Syria beginning a state that goes towards normalization. This is what the Americans need. Americans need Syria to normalize relations with Israel.
And under that condition, what will happen?
Well, it depends. I think that
you will see Syria strive?
Well, today there are many questions regarding Syria. I think that when the time is suitable for Julani to normalize with Israel, he will go for it.
Okay.
He is a pragmatic person that follows his own interests without abiding with any belief. And when he has the chance, he will do that. But the problem is that he fears that going towards normalization at this time will lead to some internal movements that he doesn't need at this time. This is the time to try to have or to be successful in ruling Syria, and to be successful in that, you have to minimize the movement inside of Israel by not giving them a reason to move. Going toward normalization will give them a reason to move.
Okay, but
so
before going to the step of normalization with Israel, the senior U.S. diplomatic delegation that arrived into Syria on Friday to engage in direct talks with al-Julani did not give al-Julani major solutions or even the help that he expected from them. Despite the fact they said that we need to observe and see how al-Julani will monitor the government, how he will create this transition, how he will function with the transitional government, how he will protect the minorities, how he will give the women its own rights inside Syria. We need to sit back and observe before actually being excited about engaging in political talks or even trying to implement what al-Julani wants from us to implement. One of them is is to lift the sanctions on Syria.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because
So it's a long way to go before going to that step of normalization, don't you think so?
of course it's a very long way to go towards that. But Giuliani is sending messages that he is ready to accept it at the right time. And that's why the Americans came. You know, if the Americans have or believe that it's impossible for him to normalize, they wouldn't have come to Syria.
I mean, they
But-
came and visited a man whose name is listed or his group is listed on a terrorist list,
yeah.
and that by itself is a shock.
Yeah, no, it's not a shock. It's what the U.S. always works like this. It either has official relations with terrorists or it has unofficial relations with terrorists. It doesn't have any problem with having relations with terrorist groups, and that's what we know about the U.S. But Giuliani is telling Americans at the right time, I'm ready to normalize, and that's what the Americans need at this moment.
Okay.
Only him being ready for that. When the right time comes, they will ask him to do so. They all know that this is not the right time, and that's why the Americans are saying, not only the Americans,
We need
all
time.
the world, even Iran, even
European
Saudi
Union
Arabia,
also said that they want to give it Giuliani time.
every country in the region, every international country is saying today that we still need time to understand how things will move inside of Syria. We still need time to understand how Giuliani will react inside of Syria. Till now, no country is taking action, of course, except Turkey, because Turkey is the one who is mainly after everything happened. But other than Turkey, no country is taking action inside of Syria. All countries are sitting behind and observing how things will move on. Will they have chaos inside of Syria, or will Giuliani rule? What is the kind of rule? What's the constitution he will have? Will he have an Islamic government or a secular government? These are all questions that time needs to answer them.
Okay, look at it from a different perspective. I ask a question here. What are the factors that will ban or stop the Israelis from the dream come through of creation of greater Israel? And as you highlighted, pointing on several countries that they would love to invade, and even if they have, especially if they have the green light to do that, like for example, what's happening inside Syria. What are the factors that will stop the Israelis from doing that? And what are the factors that will stop the Arab nations from normalizing with the Israelis? Because that's the wider picture.
No.
We're looking at factors that are contributing to the applications of these major rules. First of all, the creation of greater Israel, and second of all, normalization from Arab countries with the Israelis. What are the factors that will stop this plan from being accomplished?
Regarding Greater Israel, the only factor is for the acts of resistance to stay strong. This is the only thing.
Exactly.
Well, if Arab states don't realize till today that what is not letting Israelis establish Greater Israel is because it has strong enemies in the region that are willing to use the needed limit of power to not let this happen. So the only factor that will not let Israel achieve Greater Israel is for the acts of resistance to stay strong and to become stronger and stronger. As for normalization, I think that, well, there are two factors. Number one, it's related to the Americans. When the Americans lose interest, or when their interest starts declining regarding normalization, this is the point where Arab states won't go towards normalization, because Arab states mainly go towards normalization not because they need relations with Israel, it's because they need better relations with the US.
Okay.
They view normalization with Israel as being a bridge between them and the US. So if the US doesn't have more interest with normalization, then these states want to continue to do that. And number two, when the cost of normalization becomes higher than the benefits. And that's what we have seen regarding Saudi Arabia today.
Yes, for example, Morocco normalized with the Israelis, and still we do not see these vital nourishment in the economy in Morocco, or even it's only a normalization, as you pointed. It's as if there is a greater plan behind this normalization, as they're building a bridge between
Exactly.
these Arab nations and the United States.
Yes.
Okay, so again, if Russia and China became the dominant power, will the Arab nations still be interested to normalize with the Israelis to please the United States?
Yes, it will. Yes, their interest will decrease because
Okay.
now they have when Russia and China becomes more stronger in the region, the Arab states will have leverage over over the U.S.
Yes.
And then these Arab states won't have to serve the American interest anymore to the maximum limit. They would have the ability to say no. They would have the ability to refuse some
Exactly.
decisions
Because they're not interested anymore.
Because they are interested, but not to the same limit they were before. Now they have other superpowers where they can have different relations between the East and the West at the same time.
Okay, Dr. Mohammed Swaidan, academic and writer in international affairs, thank you very much for joining us in this very important, insightful information.
Welcome.
Dear viewers, our time is up. We'll be here tomorrow with more political updates. Stay tuned.